Uh, Hello, everybody. I'm Jim Cox with the Halsey Hall chapter. This is our Hank Aaron presentation. I'm going to correct myself and say our Henry Aaron presentation. So on behalf of the Halsey Hall chapter, we're delighted to have Jason Schwartz for a guest presentation on Henry Aaron. So without further ado, Jason is a member of the Emil Roth Chicago chapter. Did I pronounce the last name correctly?
I think so. I think so.
Okay.
I've never met the man, but that's what we say in our chapter.
All right. So he's been a chapter member there since 2019, and he's co-chair of SABR's Baseball Cards Research Committee. He's a lifelong baseball fan and card collector whose main collecting interest is Henry Aaron, uh, and of course, popularly known as Hank Aaron. He's also a renowned card artist, quote unquote. Those are his quotes, whose work under the name Henry J. Studios has raised more than $13,000 for charity during the pandemic. Way to go, Jason. You didn't put that in because I did.
Oh, thank you.
And, and has been featured in the sporting news. Jason is also the author of more than 50 articles for the SABR Baseball Cards blog and has been a presenter or moderator at numerous SABR meetings, including SABR 50. So, Jason, welcome. I turn it over to you.
Jim, thank you very much. So what I'll do, because I brought a lot of material today, is I'm just going to jump in. I hope that is okay. I will start by sharing my screen, which we think works, and go into slideshow mode. And then on cue, I'm going to admit someone from the waiting room, but let's go into slideshow mode. And here we are. So I want to say thank you to Jim for inviting me, and thank you to all of you for being here. This presentation is called Hank Aaron, More to the Story, and there's a little bit of a story behind that, which is just after Hank Aaron passed away through the Baseball Cards Research Committee of SABR, I did a presentation on Hank Aaron's cardboard career, basically his life in baseball cards, and tied it to the history of baseball cards themselves. And so when Jim got in touch with me and asked if I could do a Hank Aaron presentation for Halsey Hall, right? I thought, well, I've sort of already done baseball cards. I tend to tie a lot of my presenting to what my knowledge is, which tends to be more, I'm kind of in a little slice of SABR that's, different from the biographers and the true historians and games project and stadium experts. For me, a lot of my baseball love and baseball knowledge comes through my collection and my collectibles. And so I thought, well, I've already used up baseball cards, but I collect Hank Aaron magazines as well. So I think what I'm going to try for Halsey Hall is to find a way to share some new information about Hank Aaron, some things you might not know already, that's mostly inspired from the magazines in my collection, but also from really combing through all the newspaper articles during his career. So newspapers.com was a resource. Through SABR, our sporting news archive was certainly a resource. And then certain magazines like the Saturday Evening Post, Sports Illustrated, and Jet Magazine have digital archives as well. So I just tried to go through and find anything that just felt like a little nugget people might not know. Now, I have to admit, the degree of difficulty presenting a well-known player like Hank Aaron to an audience of SABR members, there is a good chance you will all know every single thing that I came up with, no matter how obscure I think it is. So bear with me, but I will consider it a success if by the end you learn 3 things that you didn't know before about Hank Aaron. So I'm going to try my best on that with more to the story. Okay, so from there, first off, we all know we lost the Hammer just a month and a half ago, and just shy of his birthday. And so anyways, rest in peace, Hammer. This is it would be hard to find a player more beloved and more accomplished in the game. And so a great loss to the baseball world. And I will admit, as we were losing Hall of Famer after Hall of Famer in 2020, I kept wondering if I was going to wake up to the bad news that the Hammer had passed. And of course, we escaped 2020, but it didn't take long in 2021. So that's just when we thought we were out of the water. So Jim did such a great job introducing me, but I'll just repeat. I'm from the Chicago group. I'm also a national co-chair of our Baseball Cards Committee. If you didn't know we had one of those, but you're into cards, get in touch. We do fun things. We have a great time in that group. My main collecting focus, but as my family will tell you, not his only, is Hank Aaron. And so one of the centerpieces of my collection is all of his main cards from his rookie year through the end of his career. But I'm an equal opportunity collector. So besides magazines, I do bobbleheads. Anything you can think of with a Hank Aaron collection, I do. And then Jim mentioned I make little glittery special cards to raise money for charity during the pandemic. So just an example of a Hank Aaron card that I made. So I'm a little bit being facetious as I say this. However, I thought before we get into some of the things you might not know, let's set the table with a quick video on who is Hank Aaron, just in case you don't know. And so I have a 7-year-old friend, in fact, who is the owner of the glitter card you're looking at, who's going to just give us a quick introduction on who Hank Aaron is. If you haven't seen the video, I think you're going to love it. If you've seen it, I think you're going to love seeing it again. It's just a really great one. So here we go. Hank who? Some of you don't know who Hank Aaron is? I've got you covered, or my friend Austin does. Let's see.
And my parents
hold on a sec here. Back it up. Okay.
Welcome to Mobile, Alabama. It's Black History Month, and my parents are from Mobile, Alabama, a city where tons of Black history was made. So I decided to explore Mobile. My first stop was to learn about the legend, Hank Aaron. Hank was born in Mobile, Alabama in 1934. He grew up in a poor family. His parents couldn't afford baseball equipment, so he practiced by hitting bottle caps with sticks. It's safe to say that all that practice paid off because on April 8th, 1974, Hank hit his 715th career home run, breaking Babe Ruth's 39-year-old record. But Hank's success came with a price. He was assigned a bodyguard because of the death threats and hate mail he received. While his team slept in one hotel, Hank slept in another. And oftentimes, he had to sneak out of the back of stadiums after the games to avoid assassination. Hank Aaron retired in 1976 with 755 career home runs and 25 All-Star appearances. In 1982, he was elected into the Baseball Hall of Fame. Hank Aaron died in Atlanta in his sleep on January 22nd, 2021, at the age of 86, 14 days before his 87th birthday. I am thankful for his sacrifices, and long live Hammerin' Hank Aaron. Even though I'm learning about Black history, I still can't forget to show love to the people in Mobile that need me.
Oh, with your Hank Aaron.
All righty. Well, it's going to be hard for me to top Austin, but I love this kid. He's 7 years old. He's actually been making videos kind of like this since he was, I think, 4 maybe. And at any rate, whoops, there we go. Okay, well, sorry, Austin. But at any rate, now everybody knows who Hank Aaron is and what his main accomplishments are, and I'll just fill in some extras and sort of augment what Austin put out. So I'm going to start with a little bit of prehistory. But not much. So we're not looking at Hank Aaron here. We're looking at a player named Ray Neal, and he's standing in for a larger trend. This is the Sporting News, minus the picture. The picture's an add-on, but the articles are from the Sporting News, March 5th, 1952, talking about Ray Neal being signed away from the Clowns by the Dallas Eagles and essentially being the first Black player on the Dallas Eagles. Now, unfortunately, he did not survive long. He played something like 2 spring training games and was immediately released and sent back to the Indianapolis Clowns. However, he is, I'm going to say, symbolic of something that was going on a lot in 1952, which was all the top talent from the Negro Leagues was of interest to the white clubs. And so he was, I believe, one of 9 significant players from the 1951 Clowns who was signed by a white club prior to the start of the 52 season. So I say he's standing in for a lot of players. There was so much churn in these Negro Leagues teams that where they might have had a semi-stable lineup from year to year prior to this, this was really when there was a need to go out and find a lot of new young players to take the place of all the top talent being signed by white clubs. So he was an infielder, he was an all-star, he was one of the top hitters in the league in 1951. It turned out he came back, right? But you know, a month before the season started, it looked like he was gone, that he would be in Dallas for the season. So it's in this context of Sid Pollock and the Indianapolis Clowns knowing that they might need some players to replace a lot of their top talent, that Hank Aaron boarded a train in Mobile, Alabama. This may be a photo that you've seen through the Negro Leagues Baseball Museum or in other places, and I've paired it with an article from April 6th, 1952, just a paper in North Carolina. If I go down to the bottom, we get sort of our first glimpse of Hank Aaron. And what do we see here? Henry Aaron, young shortstop, will team up with Williams in what is expected to be the top double play combination of the circuit. I thought it was interesting because, of course, Hank Aaron hasn't played any games for the Clowns yet, right? He came from pretty humble baseball origins, right? We heard from Austin that he was hitting bottle caps with sticks. Now, he eventually made semi-pro in Mobile, and in fact, I believe played against the Indianapolis Clowns during a barnstorming or exhibition tour through Mobile. So he was a bit of a known commodity, but based on how little he had really been out there in the baseball world, it was an interesting thing to me that he was this hyped, right? It almost reminds me of today in baseball where there are 16 and 17-year-olds we've heard of already, right? From the Dominican Republic or other places. Let's fast forward a little bit. I guess I'll close off my people thing because it's blocking what I need to read. But anyways, fast forward to May 1952, injuries hobbling the Clowns. We already mentioned they lost a lot of players to the white teams, but now injuries also. But going down to the bottom of the article, not all was gloom. The Clowns watched young Henry Aaron perform in the outfield and at the plate. The 18-year-old fly chaser has been the sensation of the spring exhibition contests. And this is kind of interesting because, again, thinking of his background as a baseball player, he's pretty new into the mix. And here he is playing with professionals, and he's the sensation of the spring exhibition contests already, right? We saw in the last article, by the way, that he was shortstop, and here he is in the outfield. Some of you know, as he continues through his minor league progression, we'll find him at second base. So there was a lot of kind of trying him out in different places, not because he wasn't good enough anywhere and they kept having to move him, but in some ways because he was very good in a lot of different places, although he ended up expressing a preference for the outfield over shortstop or second base ultimately. So moving ahead to June, and he's not just the sensation of camp, but we're in the real season, and he's leading the entire Negro American League. He's batting .483, which sounds like I'm reading something wrong, but .483, and he's literally leading the league in almost every single category. Runs, hits, total bases, home runs, RBIs, right? So here's this guy. He just took the train with 2 ham sandwiches from Mobile, Alabama. He is playing against grown men, and he is leading the league in virtually everything. So again, with the atmosphere being that the white clubs are looking for top talent pretty actively, we know he will not last long as an Indianapolis Clown. So sure enough, here we go. June 18th in the Sporting News, Clowns sell kid shortstop Flash to Boston Braves. And we see, and I think they actually get his age wrong here. They call him 17 when he's 18. But at any rate, the Kansas City Monarchs were dropping 3. Well, while they were dropping 3, they sold Henry Aaron, 17-year-old rookie shortstop, to the Boston Braves, who assigned him to a farm club. His average by now has dipped from .483 to .427. Still a pretty good mark. And then it goes on to talk about how they're going to replace him. But the point is, very, very brief Negro Leagues career. He was that good. So he finds himself in Eau Claire, Wisconsin, and we'll see a few articles from the Daily Telegram, which was the main paper in Eau Claire, the home of the Eau Claire Bears. And so Hank Aaron arrives. We get a little bit of a tally of his Negro League statistics with the Clowns. He finished at 427, and we note 8 home runs. And of course, 8 home runs is very significant because you add it to 755, you get 763. And Barry Bonds famously has 762. So we've all seen by now, right? MLB has decided to adopt Negro League records and statistics, but only through 1948 for now, right? One could imagine someday they might consider 1949, 1950, 1951, 1952. I won't get my hopes up on that. The point is, you maybe saw it here first, or maybe you saw it somewhere else. But the point is, if somehow 1952 ever gets included, we will have a brand new home run king, right? What's old is new. Okay, so it just interesting coincidence that happened to be the number. And I saw that corroborated in a few sources, which isn't to say it's authoritative, right? And it could be that the true Negro League statistical researchers of the world, plow through and decide some of those games didn't count because they were, exhibition or non-league or other things. So again, don't walk away from this declaring Hank Aaron the brand new home run king all over again because of me. But the point is, it was intriguing that these articles all pinned him with 8 home runs with the Clowns. Okay, so didn't take long. He shows up in Eau Claire, Wisconsin in June. I probably will get the number wrong, but I think he played in only something like 10 games for the Eau Claire Bears and was that quickly named to the All-Star team, right? He showed up just before the All-Star break. You wouldn't think a guy who showed up 10 games before the All-Star game could make the team, but he was that good, right? He was just that good. So by the end of the season, he was named the Rookie of the Year for the entire league, and just phenomenal. I'll be showing his numbers pretty soon. And that wasn't the end of his baseball work in 1952, because the Clowns and the Birmingham Black Barons were going to play a World Series, and the Indianapolis Clowns said, "Hey, Henry, can you come back and play for us in the World Series?" So he actually played World Series games in 1952 with the Clowns, even after he had finished the season with Mobile. I didn't know that until I was doing my research for this presentation. A good book, and there's also a DVD, A Summer Up North, really tells the great story of Hank Aaron on the Eau Claire Bears. And I think SABR members are well involved in putting all that together. So I would encourage people to take a look if you're interested in his Wisconsin chapter, or well, I shouldn't say his Milwaukee is a big Wisconsin chapter. So I'll just say his Eau Claire chapter. So, well, he wasn't going to last there very long, right? When you're essentially the best player in the league and you're that young, let's see what else he can do. So he heads to Jacksonville, which is the single A affiliate. Age 19, shortstop who's been switched to second base. We get a little bit of his Eau Claire numbers in this first article, that he hit 336. He stole 25 bases. I am soon going to show you some absolutely ridiculous numbers of his. Let me admit the waiting room real quick. I'm going to show you some really ridiculous, too good to be true Eau Claire numbers, but you know what they say about things that are too good to be true. Well, they're too good to be true. So anyways, a little bit of controversy in his Jacksonville season, by the way. So I'll show you his Jacksonville numbers soon, but he got to Jacksonville and he just tore the league up. Once again, just like in the Negro Leagues, he was leading the league in virtually everything. Now, with the All-Star game coming up, he would have been an obvious starter in the All-Star game. However, it was the 50th anniversary of the Sally League, the South Atlantic League. Hank Aaron, along with 2 teammates, had integrated the Sally League that season. Generally, he wasn't followed by controversy or anything like that. He was fairly unassuming, did his job, performed great, won over fans. But I won't be naive and say that racism did not follow him. At any rate, to mark the 50th anniversary of the Sally League All-Star game, the governor, who was a pretty rabid white supremacist, was going to be the featured speaker And there was some controversy. This article tells the story that Hank Aaron essentially was convinced to be injured for that game to not make the governor look bad, right? And then sure enough, the day after the All-Star game, Hank Aaron was back in the lineup. So that's new information to me. I did not know that prior to today, or I shouldn't say today, prior to the research I did for today. So a couple weeks ago, we'll say. But anyways, okay, here we go. We are in August now of the 1953 season, and Hank Aaron has now been named the most valuable player of the Sally League. Under the picture here, it says that he batted .368 for Jacksonville, and again, he's only 19. Two ways that we're going to look at this. So this headline, very dated headline, Negro is honored, right? Mentions one of the highest honors ever accorded a Negro athlete in the South. So that adds some significance. We're going to see that, I will say, doubled down on fairly shortly. So we go to Jet magazine, and a lot of good information. Jet was not a magazine with an extensive sports section, but a lot of times there was information that you could find or quotes that you could find in Jet magazine that I at least couldn't find in other places, right? And so it tends to be a good source, particularly for African-American players in the 1950s or even 1960s, to find something new that you didn't know before. Let me let this person in. So interestingly enough, so remember he was just awarded perhaps the highest honor that a Black athlete had ever won in the South. And the Sally League president, Dick Butler, said, "The color barrier has been broken. There's no doubt about that in Southern baseball." So it wasn't just that he had a great season, but on the strength of his season, at least according to the president, the color barrier had been, and I'll insert the word forever, broken. No doubt about it. So quite a season. Not an easy thing to do in the Southern Atlantic League. So a stop in Hank Aaron's career that many fans don't know about, and there's a reason for it, it's because it included no games, is Toledo. So 1953 Toledo. And if you're saying Toledo, what? I didn't know he played for Toledo. I thought Jacksonville was it, right? Well, after that great season that he had, right? The reporting, in fact, and it's true, it's not made up, but the reporting, in fact, was October 14th. He had been sold by the Jacksonville Braves to Toledo. They're called the Toledo Sox. Jacksonville was the single A affiliate of the Braves. The Toledo Sox, just very briefly, I think for 3 years total, were the AAA affiliate. So essentially he was going to be jumping from single A to AAA. And so he was now property, as they say, of the Toledo Sox. A couple other notable things happened. The picture on the right is Barbara Jean Lucas. That's Hank Aaron's first wife. And they were married that fall. And she soon after had their daughter, their first daughter. Also, we get a little snippet in the caption under her that talks about the newlyweds are going to honeymoon in the West Indies, where Aaron will play winter baseball. So we'll make that geography a little bit more precise. But quite a year for Hank Aaron, fantastic year on the field, got married as well, and is off to the West Indies for a honeymoon and to play more baseball. So a quick trivia break, and this is SABR, so somebody might know this, but I will be surprised. All my trivia questions today, I will be surprised if anybody knows. So the Toledo Sox were the AAA affiliate of the Milwaukee Braves, 1953 to 1955 only. Who is the only player ever to appear on a baseball card as a member of the Toledo Sox? Your hint is that it's not Hank Aaron. Anybody have any idea at all? Any guesses? Toledo Sox. Mantilla, you know what? That is not a bad guess. That is not a bad guess. I think he would have played for them. I will give a hint and say that he was the minor league player of the year in 1953. He won a world championship with the Milwaukee Braves, and he won an NBA championship with the Boston Celtics.
Steve Cutler.
Well done. Well done. So it was not in 1953, but a set called TriStar OBAC
He was Bill Russell's backup.
Yes, there you go. So a set came out in 2009 that honored Gene Conley, and just, I would say by chance, well, maybe because he was minor league player of the year with Toledo, put him in this Toledo uniform. This, to my knowledge, is the only Toledo Sox baseball card in the long history of baseball cards. So something kind of unique there. We can imagine, though, if Hank Aaron didn't make the big club, right, that potentially there'd be all kinds of Toledo Sox Hank Aaron baseball cards, not made in 1953, but after the fact, career retrospective sort of thing. So 1953, the article said West Indies. Well, we'll make it a little more precise. Puerto Rico is where Henry Aaron ended up. And we get a little bit of a report, and I thought this was curious. Aaron sparkles in Puerto Rican League, and I was able to find this information in the Eau Claire Daily Telegram. So it's been a year and a half since Hank Aaron played for Eau Claire, but he's almost adopted as a favorite son. The chronicling of his career is pretty strong in the Eau Claire Daily Telegram for quite a few more years. And in some cases, right, I mean, a lot of times we're looking at AP or whatever that's just put in all kinds of papers. But in a lot of cases, what I found was, here's something that only seems to be in the Eau Claire paper, and I'm not finding it anywhere else, at least out of the sources I've been looking at. So kind of interesting. But they talk about him in Puerto Rico, and there's a common theme. I know the print is small, so I won't ask you to read it at all. There is a common theme, which is, once again, he seems to be the best player at practically everything. Here he is hitting over 350 in Puerto Rico. So everywhere he's played, he is just off the charts phenomenal so far, right? But of course, the level of competition will only go up from here. 1954 Bradenton, right? What? He played for the Bradenton team? Well, no, that's the spring training site of the Milwaukee Braves at that time. So I just wanted to highlight three things from spring training 1954. Number one is there are a lot of articles that talk about him for his speed, right? That he's, it's interesting because you'll also find articles that talk about him seeming to be kind of a lazy runner, or a guy who doesn't chase fly balls very hard or whatever. But when he wants to be fast, he can be really fast. So there were a lot of articles I came across that talk about him as a very, a speedster, a young speedster for the Braves. I chose this one simply because it had a picture, and any picture you find from the early 50s in a newspaper is often one that nobody's seen before. So I pulled that out. But also he's touted for swinging the bat really hard, right? There are articles about a 430-foot blast, or taking batting practice and wowing the crowd with how far he hit with such an easy swing and all these things. And of course, he wasn't a big, imposing figure, right? Came in a little less than 180 pounds, looked like kind of a skinny kid, right? Deceptively strong, but in uniform, he always looked like a skinny guy in a baggy uniform. And so people were pretty amazed when they saw what he could do to a baseball, right? But the third article is the one that's probably the most important in terms of his career trajectory. So Bobby Thompson, a hero from 1951, who we'll read about again soon, or actually closer to the end of the presentation. Bobby Thompson, of course, broke or fractured an ankle sliding into second base toward the end of spring training. And that, as the story goes, opened up either the roster spot or the starting spot, take your pick, for Hank Aaron. And so Hank Aaron, who perhaps might have gone to Toledo and played for the Toledo Sox in April, instead stayed with the big club and, stayed essentially for 21 years with the Braves, and of course 2 more with the Milwaukee Brewers. So here we are now, 1954 in Milwaukee. I mentioned Hank Aaron's numbers were off the charts, but you have no idea how much. I've got his 1954. I wish I owned it. This is sadly just off the internet. I have his 1954 Johnston Cookies card. That was a local issue in Wisconsin. I nickname it his Cookie Rookie. But anyways, his 1954 card, and in his 87 games attributed to Eau Claire, they have him down for 29 home runs and a Hack Wilson-esque 161 RBIs. 87 games, 161 RBIs for the Eau Claire Bears. It turns out that the first number in each of those totals doesn't belong. He had 9 home runs and he had 61 RBIs. So he wasn't quite that good, but you can imagine if you were a kid growing up in Milwaukee and you bought a cookie and you got this card and you flipped it over, and here's a guy maybe you've never even heard of, right? There was no internet back then. You say, holy smokes, this guy's on our team. Wow. So anyways, I don't have the cookie rookie, but one of my favorite pieces in my collection is this snapshot that you see on the right-hand side. This is purported to be Hank Aaron on his way to work in 1954, right? Just a little candid, or maybe he even stopped to face the camera when somebody said, hey, can I get a picture or something like that. So that's not his signature under it or anything like that. It's just the scrapbook owner who had written his name and put the date 1954. I can't guarantee you that it's 1954. Perhaps it's 5 or 6, but he's certainly a young looking fellow, and the writing on it makes me want to believe that it's authentic to 1954. So at any rate, a good look of him going to work. So we're back to Jet magazine, and one of the things that Jet tended to do, and you'll see another year of such predictions, is they tended to make predictions for the upcoming season. So here we are in an April issue, and let's take a look at what Doc Young is expecting for the 1954 season. Well, he's expecting Brooklyn to repeat as National League champs. Well, I'm talking to SABR. You all know that didn't happen. Well, Brooklyn in 55, wow. But 54, of course, that was the year of the catch. Willie Mays sweeping Cleveland 4-0 1954 World Series. So they didn't quite get that right. Let's go to their next prediction, next paragraph down. Biggest early season batting disappointment will be giant Willie Mays, who will learn he doesn't hit with as much power as he's been led to believe he does. Well, you may recall in 1954, Willie Mays was the National League MVP and in fact had more than 50 home runs for the first of 2 times in his career. So we're going to say Doc Young is 0 for 2 on
I believe that was his career high too.
Yeah, exactly. I think it was 54 home runs that year. So if we go down now to Hank Aaron, I've got Aaron highlighted. Sally League batting champion Hank Aaron will make a fast start with Milwaukee's Braves, and that was a little bit true, but will be sent to Toledo to learn not to take so many good pitches. And so that's, of course, we know that Hank Aaron was never sent back down to Toledo. But one of the funny things, right, and I'm not going to say Doc Young has this entirely wrong, but in the from about 1954 to 1959, one of the tags on Hank Aaron wasn't that he took too many good pitches. It was that he swung at everything. He swung at garbage. They could throw at his head, and he would swing at that, right? And I'll actually have a funny story about that in a couple of slides. So we're going to say Doc's predictions for the 1954 season were not that good. Now, when you're not that good at predicting, specificity is your worst enemy. The more specific your prediction is, the more likely you get it wrong, right? Well, let's look at his last one, by the way. And this one, Minnesota chapter, it has your name on it. That great nomad, Satchel Paige, pitching real cool in Hell, Minnesota, will toss a perfect game at the House of Davids on his 54th birthday. Well, we don't think that happened. And although it's a little bit apocryphal when Satchel Paige's true birth date was, his 54th birthday, as commonly understood, would have been in about 1960. So predicting that for 1954 probably wasn't the best move. But anyways, there we go. All right. Some funny things happened, and I'm sort of skipping the bulk of the 1955 season, even though it was a terrific one for Hank Aaron. And I just, again, my emphasis wasn't how did he do that year? Well, that's all on Baseball Reference. It's more just finding fun tidbits that you might not have known about. So we're going to look at the things that happened after the 1955 season and before the 1956 season started. Number 1 was Mobile. Hank Aaron left there with 2 ham sandwiches, and I'm not going to say he was an unknown. He was a good student. He had distinguished himself playing against grown men for the Mobile Bay Bears semi-pro, or Mobile semi-pro. But by October 22nd of 1955, there was already Hank Aaron Day in Mobile, which is pretty cool. And accompanying the celebration were Willie Mays, Monty Banks, who I believe is Ernie Banks, and Gene Baker from the Cubs. And then this is some interesting phrasing, other sepia baseball greats, in other words, black baseball greats. We'll see some interesting adjectives as we progress, including players who added beige to their team's rosters. That was yet another way that some of the black players were referred to in print in those days. So What else besides Hank Aaron Day? I thought this was a fun one from the January 21st Pittsburgh Courier. It was very good news when the Mobile Recreation Department announced that Henry Hank Aaron will work with the department until spring training begins. So in other words, he got a job with the parks, Park and Rec, he was working, and we bet the turnout for instruction and admiration will be terrific. So there may be grown men, grown women in their early or mid 70s right now, right, from Mobile, who had coach Hank Aaron give them some pointers when they were kids at the park. So I thought that was a cute thing. We all know ball players back in the day often found off-season jobs to help with the bills. And so in Hank Aaron's case, here's what he was doing. He was working for the parks. What else though? If folks have traveled through the South or have relatives in the South, when you think of Mardi Gras, you certainly think of New Orleans, but it turns out Mobile is huge for Mardi Gras. I only know this because my wife is from New Orleans and has relatives in Mobile. But at any rate, Henry Hank Aaron received the key to the city on Mardi Gras as the honorary mayor of Black Mardi Gras. So quite an off season. And really what you see reflected here is that however modest his beginnings were in Mobile, here he is, at this point, we'll say 4 years after he signed with the Indianapolis Clowns and maybe 3.5 years after he began playing for them, that he seems to be essentially a favorite son of Mobile. And what you'll soon see is where he ranks among all Black men and women from the state of Alabama. That will be impressive when I show you that coming soon. What else was going on before the 1956 season kicked off? There was a lot of talk about Babe Ruth's record being broken, not the 714. There was largely no talk, but the 60 home runs. And so this is Bertie Tibbetts, who was managing the Reds, or the Red Legs, if you like. He talked about the three favorites being Ted Kluszewski, Willie Mays, and Eddie Matthews. Possibly because he was the manager of Kluszewski, he ultimately decided Kluszewski had the best chance. Hank Aaron didn't really factor into the story other than that part of what would help Eddie Matthews potentially break Ruth's record was having Hank Aaron bat behind him. So there's a little bit of a funny story there, which is that Hank Aaron used to talk about the worst part of batting cleanup behind Eddie Matthews was that Eddie Matthews hit so many home runs, and then the pitchers would often want to take it out on Hank rather than wait 9 more spots through the lineup for Eddie Matthews to come back and get beamed. But okay, so this was the Long Branch, New Jersey daily record, and through AP, but the Pittsburgh Courier, part of the Black Press, had essentially their own version of the article, and this time instead of Bertie Tibbetts making the predictions, it was Ernie Banks. And so Banks had not yet been back-to-back MVP, but he was certainly already a superstar in the league and a prodigious home run hitter for a shortstop. He named his favorites as Roy Campanella, Hank Aaron, and Willie Mays, ultimately went with Willie Mays as the person he thought would beat Ruth's record. And in the case of Hank Aaron, cited Milwaukee County Stadium as just being too big to lend itself to any home run record. And I wish I could remember it. Hank Aaron had a quote in one of the articles that I read where he in fact talked about, oh, if I could have played all my games at this particular park, I think I would have really been an accomplished home run hitter. And of course, there's some irony there because when we think about who's the most accomplished home run hitter of all time, practically, well, Hank Aaron might be the first name to come to mind. But at any rate, he didn't see himself as an accomplished home run hitter at that time. And part of it was the stadium that he played in. So Banks picked up on that and ultimately decided the home park was too big for Hank. But as I was researching all these articles, it was fun for me to find any mention of Hank Aaron with respect to a Babe Ruth record. Okay, so here we go, quiz time again. So this is Wendell Smith, one of our best baseball writers ever, and when it comes to the Black Press, certainly one of the 1 or 2 most prominent. He had a column that same day in the Pittsburgh Courier, so that same magazine newspaper where Ernie Banks is talking about who might break Ruth's record. And he credits Hank Aaron with a notable first among all players, black or white. Does anybody want to guess what that notable first was? Okay, seeing and hearing none, I will say, if you know my sense of humor, I'm setting you up. Here comes his notables first. It could have been integrating the Sally League, but the notable first, if we go down to the bottom, and a big part of this column, by the way, are some famous firsts and progress of Black players in terms of integration and the accomplishments of Jackie Robinson. But here we go. I will read here. Whether the Braves finish first or last, Aaron already owns the distinction of being a first, not only as a Negro, but as an American baseball player. The record books list players by their names alphabetically, A to Z. Thus, very first name in the record book is Henry Hank Aaron, right? That's I think you all know, but I just thought it was great that Smith made that kind of the punchline of his column. Another thing that was interesting to me, and I would love to learn more, is that Wendell Smith, in recapping Hank Aaron's career to this point, touches on his origins with the Clowns and describes it this way. He made his professional debut with the Indianapolis Clowns of the Negro American League in 1952. After 2 months, the Braves signed him. So here's Wendell Smith, who covers the Negro Leagues prodigiously, referring to Hank Aaron's tenure with the Clowns as a straitjacket. Now, I'm assuming the connotation of straitjacket today is about the same as it was when this was written, but it wasn't the way I expected Wendell Smith to describe the Negro Leagues or the Clowns. So that's something that I'd be curious to learn more about. I'm just calling it out as, you know, as you read these old newspaper articles and you find out new things and learn new things. Occasionally, it's just the way something's described that kind of catches your eye as, I wonder what made him say that. And certainly there were, you know, the long bus rides and, you know, tough accommodations and things like that. So it could have certainly been any number of things, but I was still surprised that that was his description. Okay, we get now to an article that a lot of Hank Aaron fans or anyone doing, you know, some biographical research ends up getting to. This is the Saturday Evening Post, August 25th, 1956, sort of the first big profile of Hank Aaron in the national press with an article called Born to Play Ball. The author is Furman Bisher. This is an article that's sometimes pointed to for ways that it portrayed Hank Aaron in an unflattering light. Some of the quotes attributed to him are in broken or uneducated sounding English. And if we even go just to the title, Born to Play Ball, Milwaukee's prodigious Hank Aaron doesn't go in for scientific hitting. He just grabs a bat and blasts away. There is an undercurrent in the article that here's Hank Aaron. He's kind of this silly, dopey, uneducated guy who just is gifted with so much God-given talent that almost in spite of himself, he's knocking the ball out of the park and batting .350, right? And so in some ways, not a very flattering portrayal. But at any rate, I'll share some things that I learned from the piece. And it was a long piece. It went on a ways, as you can see. I know nobody can read the small print, not even me. So I chose a few things. So I'll read this. Out of a little radio on the shelf oozed the easy, natural tones of Henry Aaron in a recorded commercial. And this is Hank Aaron saying, I'll see you around for the such and such lumber company. Hold that thought. We're going to come back to it later. There were raucous cheers and whistles and a gentle needle or two. Man, somebody hollered, listen to that Henry make money. So this was a section of the article talking about his popularity as an endorser of products already, right? In 1956, he wasn't yet MVP. He wasn't yet a world champ, right? But he was an outstanding player and he was racking up endorsements already. I wouldn't have known that if I hadn't been invited to do some research for this very presentation. Here we go again. While he had a total of 40 home runs in his first 2 big league seasons, it is unlikely that Aaron will break any records in this department, right? Hank Aaron break home run records? Nah. So I thought that was kind of cute. Okay, so we've seen a big write-up in the Saturday Evening Post. We've seen Hank Aaron mentioned in some Jet magazines, mentioned in the Sporting News. Is there anyone who wants to guess his first appearance on a magazine cover, on the actual cover? Year, title, anything. It's a tough one. I will be surprised if anybody already knows this or is able to guess it.
1961, Sport magazine, I think.
Okay. You know what? You are very close. We will see some sport magazines, and there is one cover a little before 61, and then one really nice cover just after 61. So I will show this, and you'll say, what? So it is called HEP Magazine, and it's essentially Black celebrity culture meets the National Enquirer. It is, I say this in the most affectionate of ways. It's kind of trash journalism, sensationalism, et cetera. It's basically the National Enquirer, but with a focus on the Black community. And so Hank Aaron makes his first magazine cover that I'm aware of. And believe me, I have spent a long time researching this very thing because I collect these magazines. And oh gosh, the story is, have those new sex pills made baseball history for Milwaukee's Hank Aaron? So kind of unfortunate that this is his first magazine. Because it's his first, I felt like I had to buy it, but I feel like it's kind of an oddity in my collection that I'm not super proud of. And sure enough, as you open it up, and yes, I've read the whole story, yep, not just clickbait. That's what the story is about. If there are questions at the end, I'm happy to fill in some details, but unfortunately, that does appear to be his first magazine cover. I'll give honorable mention to the Sporting News that came out a couple months before that, because as part of their opening day feature, we can perhaps recognize Hank Aaron in the outfield with Ted Williams and Mickey Mantle in kind of cartoon form. The reason I don't count this is because I don't think of the Sporting News as a magazine. I treat it more like a newspaper, but one could, claim it as his first if they chose. It's potato, maybe. But okay, in HEP magazine, he was pictured along with some other celebrities, and on that Sporting News, he was pictured along with several other baseball players. So what about his first solo appearance on a magazine cover? And yet again, I think this is just something that you could never guess in a million years. If you happen to know it, well, you're almost as much of a Hank Aaron collector nerd as me, because this is pretty obscure. But remember that he was on the radio advertising for lumber company so-and-so. Well, the endorsements paid off, because here he is. I believe this is his first solo magazine cover of his career. October 1957, American Forests, and kudos to whoever put in this little double entendre for the headline, "Wood at Work in Wisconsin," referring to his bat. As it turned out.
Sure?
I hope so.
Well, it might have to do with that previous cover, huh?
Let's hope not. Let's not go there. But at any rate, this doesn't have a really long, 6-page story or anything like that. He's almost on the cover and nothing else. There's a couple quick little snippets inside the magazine, but more or less, he's just on the cover. So this was a tough one to add to my collection. You can't imagine too many people saved these from back in the day. American Forests, October 1957. So what about Sports Illustrated, right? We think Sports Illustrated, a lot of prominent athletes make that cover. Interestingly enough, the Milwaukee Braves were all over the cover of Sports Illustrated from 1954 to 1960, and quite a selection of players. Hank Aaron did not make it until 1969, of course, by then Atlanta Braves. But you can see just how many times the Braves made the cover. So when we think, why wouldn't Hank Aaron be on the cover? The answer isn't small market baseball team, right? It could be other things, but it's not small market baseball team. And of course, Eddie Matthews famously made the very first cover of Sports Illustrated. And spoiler alert, in case you wanted to look up that second Eddie Matthews cover, Sports Illustrated, for its 1-year anniversary, reprinted its original cover. So basically, the first two things both look like this, other than the date. So I highlighted here March 3rd, 1958, and it says several players. And so I want to dig a little deeper into that one. This is a spring training 1958 issue. It's a little hard to make out, but we actually have the Yankees and the Braves, who of course had played in the previous World Series, both sharing a field and doing warm-ups and things like that. So I'm going to say it's only by chance that Hank Aaron didn't make this cover somehow, right? Good chance Hank Aaron is just to the left or just to the right of the players who are shown. And if you turn to page 16 of the issue, there's actually a really cool, or a picture I really like, of Hank Aaron And then Sports Illustrated also has a picture that they date March 1st. It's not in the magazine, but it's Hank Aaron with Mickey Mantle. I would have to imagine it was probably taken, and on that same trip. But at any rate, didn't make it into the magazine. But no Hank Aaron cover yet for Sports Illustrated. However, August 12th, Hank Aaron gets a terrific write-up in Sports Illustrated that goes on for, I believe, 5 pages. I think it's 5 pages. We'll see soon enough because I put it all in here. He's the main event in this issue of Sports Illustrated. And again, kudos to the headline writer. I think this is pretty genius. Murder with a blunt instrument. And again, I believe we're referring to his baseball bat, but some could argue, I guess. Right. However, Russell Schlee, the champion hydro racer, made the cover. So one of the things, spoiler alert, for Sports Illustrated, in the mid and late 1950s, their covers tended to be athletes you just wouldn't even recognize, usually who played things outside what we would call today maybe the 4 major sports. So a hydro racer, right? And I would even say that there were more show dogs who made the cover of Sports Illustrated than baseball players in the 1950s. And if I'm wrong, it's not by much. So the Sports Illustrated we think of today with LeBron or Kobe 10 years ago or Jordan, in the 90s, no. Almost always it seemed to feature aspects of sporting life that were, at least by today's standards, a bit off the radar. So here's Murder with a Blunt Instrument. I will try to let in Howard. Here we go. This is where Hank Aaron was by August of 1957, except as simple fact, this slender 23-year-old Negro from Mobile, Alabama is the best right-handed hitter seen in the National League since the days of Rogers Hornsby. So that is incredibly high praise. Rogers Hornsby, by the way, will be chiming in soon on Hank Aaron's chances of hitting 400. I want to read a little bit more of this. Perhaps the most unusual part of the Aaron story is the fact that no one gets very excited about it. Sometimes it's even easy to forget that Henry Aaron is around. Without the physical proportions or explosive speed of Mickey Mantle, without the breathtaking color of a Willie Mays, without the long and brilliant and controversial career of Ted Williams, Aaron seems to be hardly a personality at all. He says practically nothing, stays out of nightclubs, and here's my favorite part, never loses his cap running the bases, and then let's make sense of this one too, and spits only upon the ground. You wonder, as opposed to where else, but okay. Maybe on an umpire. He has not even had time to become the quiet but lethal legend, which is Musial. All he does is walk up to the plate 4 or 5 times a day to hit a baseball. So I loved that description. And again, we're not reading about the home run king. We're reading about a 23-year-old kid, and he's awesome already. But these are some of the names he's compared to, although contrasted with in some ways. And so throughout the 50s, a common theme in descriptions of Hank Aaron is that he is pretty unassuming. He is pretty quiet. He's got a bit of a sense of humor, right? But most of the time, you almost don't notice he's there, right? But then he steps up to the plate and hits a double or something like that. So the article goes on and on and on with a couple really cool pictures. And then what we learn about Hank Aaron, so remember that Jet Magazine prediction, he's going to be sent back to Toledo because he takes too many good pitches. Well, actually, he's a notorious bad ball hitter whose strike zone was once described by ex-Braves manager Charlie Grimm as a general area ranging from the top of his head to his toes. And then I love this story. When Aaron was playing in the Sally League, an opposing pitcher once warned a teammate, "Don't waste time dusting him off. The last 2 I threw at his head, he hit out of the park." So, and I did read somewhere that Hank Aaron describes in his own evolution that initially he liked to take the first pitch just to kind of see what the pitcher had, but he realized quickly that that put him in the hole too much. And so after that, he said, never mind, if it's close, I'm swinging. So, right. Okay, a little bit more here. I hope I don't make anybody thirsty, but with the Seagram's ad. So in terms of defense, this was interesting. Hank Aaron would go on to win Gold Gloves, but here he is. He's above average defensively, could be better if he wanted to badly enough. And then there's kind of a fun quote at the end. When you ask Henry now why he doesn't run harder defensively, he grins a little and says, "I'm pacing myself." Now, as we know, he played in the major leagues 23 years, so he may have been smarter than everybody else by pacing himself, right? He certainly had the longevity and didn't burn out running as hard as he could or crashing into a wall like he was Pete Reiser or something like that. So now what about his Sports Illustrated covers? They would not come until 1969, focusing on kind of that race in the National League, between the different teams. And now, what else did Hank Aaron have to do to make the cover of Sports Illustrated? Oh, not much. Just get 3,000 hits, which at that time was not a long list of players. If you just look, I know these are all, tiny on your screen, but if you just look at the photographs and their black and whiteness, you can tell it wasn't an everyday thing back then for someone to join the 3,000 hit club. It's basically Hank Aaron, Stan Musial, and guys from a really, really, really long time ago. I suppose one could argue Paul Wainer was a little more of a tweener. And then what else to make the cover of Sports Illustrated? Oh, you just need to break Babe Ruth's home run record, pardon me. So only 3 SI covers during his playing career, none before 1969. Now, we know about SI at the time, right? Through the 60s, the 50s, and even bigger sport magazine was Sport Magazine. There, how'd you like that? So he did make it onto the cover of 5 sport magazines during his playing career. His first one was a cameo. Bob Turley got most of the real estate, but Hank Aaron is kind of the middle guy on that far left issue from October 58. His first cover, where he was the most prominent, July 62. Then he really got the whole cover to himself in 68, did okay in 1970. And then again, breaking Ruth's record, that's going to get you all kinds of covers. In fact, he got Newsweek, Ebony, Jet, etc. This magazine detour, where were we? Well, we were really just looking at the 1957 season. This was a home run when he hit it that he described as the most important and most exciting home run of his career. And I've heard in some interviews, even after he broke Babe Ruth's record, that this particular home run from September 24th, or actually the home run was on September 23rd, 1957, was still the most significant home run of his career. This was, by many accounts of his own, the greatest moment of his career, which was that he delivered the pennant to the Braves with an 11th inning walk-off homer. That is pretty awesome to think about, giving your team the pennant with a walk-off homer, right? Now, you might be thinking, has anyone else ever done that, I should say, grammatically? Well, famously, yes. And here's Hank Aaron recalling it from 6 years earlier. He says about this home run, "I knew I hit it real good, smiling from ear to ear while teammates pounded his back and pumped his hand. The last time I faced him, Cardinals reliever Billy Muffet, he threw me a fastball on the first pitch, so I was looking for a curve. All I could think of as I rounded the bases was Bobby Thompson's home run in 1951, the one that won the playoff game for the Giants over Brooklyn." Aaron said, "I was rooting for the Giants." So some of you maybe noticed the Dodgers insignia on my shirt. Well, my 2 favorite things in baseball are the Dodgers and Hank Aaron. This broke my heart. I always assumed Hank Aaron was a Dodger fan because he did really admire Jackie Robinson. So I just learned last week Hank Aaron was rooting for the Giants over the Dodgers. Oh, this breaks my heart. But interestingly, right? Interestingly, when you think about it, this wasn't Hank Aaron with his teammates listening to the radio in the lobby of a grand hotel. This was 1951, October 1951. So he had not yet signed with the Clowns. He had not yet taken the train to Indianapolis, right? He was a high school kid. And one would have to assume that if he was following the 1951 pennant race and rooting for the Giants, that he was following Major League Baseball, following New York baseball, following National League Baseball in 1951, whether he was getting it from newspapers or radio or whatnot. But that's actually something that I didn't know about him. Now, obviously, as a kid who loves baseball, I'm not going to say that should be a shock, but it was interesting to me the way he describes this. He is describing it as if in 1951, he was actively rooting for the Giants, not that he learned about it in 1956 and decided he was happy the Giants won. So there we get some evidence that Hank Aaron was following that playoff race, or that pennant race, I should say. Okay, so let's just go. We know the Braves, of course, won the World Series over the Yankees in 7 games in New York. And Hank Aaron, again, unassuming, there was a few interviews with him, Hank, are you excited to be world champs? And his response was something like, well, maybe when I get back to Milwaukee. that's when it's time to be excited or something like that, right? So a little bit understated. At any rate, here he is in Jet magazine. He's not yet made the cover of Jet. And as you can see from the cover, just like Sports Illustrated tended to focus on dogs, show dogs, and obscure sports, Jet magazine tended to focus on actresses, models, and showgirls. But at any rate, here's Hank Aaron coming home to an adoring crowd of 2,000 people in Mobile. We go a couple weeks later on the pages of Jet magazine. And I mentioned, remember when Hank Aaron won the greatest honor ever afforded to, as they said in the article, a Negro athlete from the South. Well, here we are. And here is Hank Aaron. There was a poll of Alabama students. Who is the most popular African-American in the history of the state of Alabama? Well, Hank Aaron didn't win. It was George Washington Carver. Second was Nat King Cole. Hank Aaron finished third, topping Booker T. Washington, Willie Mays, and Joe Louis. So here's Hank Aaron, perhaps on the strength of the World Championship. But here he is, already the third most popular African-American in the history of the state of Alabama. Awesome. And then a little bit of a write-up on his MVP. So 58-59, Hank Aaron was already on preseason magazines, right? He was now the upper stratosphere of baseball superstar. I will say this picture of Hank Aaron and Stan Musial might be my favorite baseball photograph ever. I just love it. The uniforms, the players, everything. And Hank Aaron was a huge admirer of Stan Musial. Not only did he develop a friendship and check in with Stan Musial every now and then, but evidently, even before he ever talked to Stan Musial, every now and then somebody would say to him, "Hey, how are you so good at this?" And he would attribute it to having had a conversation with Stan Musial that evidently had never happened. He does get his first Jet magazine cover in April of 1959, along with several other players. And in fact, their story was Negro Stars Key to Pennant Races in both major leagues, focusing on these 6 players in particular: Mays, Aaron, Doby, Minoso, Elston Howard, and Ernie Banks. We are used to Jet being wrong with their baseball predictions, but here we go. Despite all their laurels, I'm reading at the bottom, even the Big Six might not be able to find their way to the October Baseball Classic, but with a total of 48 Negroes playing in the majors today and no team without one of them, it's a lead pipe cinch that some beige star will help his team win a pennant and a world championship as well. So sure enough, they're right. None of these Big Six, right, did win the pennant or the World Series, but the Dodgers, Los Angeles Dodgers, of course, won in 1959, and Charlie Neal, who I guess I'll describe as beige just based on this article, but African-American player on the Dodgers, was a hero of the World Series. So good job, Jet. We now get to my favorite Hank Aaron magazine cover ever. And again, it's Jet magazine. And again, it's 1959. The longest write-up that they gave to Hank Aaron before the chase of the home run record. And what's interesting here is that Cubs batting coach Rogers Hornsby weighs in and acknowledges Aaron has all the tools to do it, meaning hit 400. And then Braves manager Fred Haney echoes it. He should hit 400. So here's Hank Aaron. And in terms of batting records, people aren't really looking at Babe Ruth now for him, but they're looking at matching Ted Williams in terms of batting 400. And Rogers Hornsby, obviously quite an authority on that. So Jet magazine, Hank Aaron did pretty well. 10 magazine covers during his career, none after his career that I'm aware of, but at any rate, he did pretty well with Jet. We could even see his wife had almost as many Jet magazine covers as Hank Aaron had Sports Illustrated covers, as she appears on 2 in a row. You might wonder, is he the leader in Jet magazine? Is that a Hank Aaron record that we didn't know about? I only tallied to 1989 because it's a weekly magazine and it's a bit tedious to go through every single one. So I stopped at 1989. But through 1989, Muhammad Ali was far and away the leader. Hank Aaron was second among baseball players and third overall with his 10 covers. Right. So where are we? And I have a confession to make with more to the story. Hank Aaron accomplished so much during his career and even after his career that I decided the only way we could get out of here before midnight would be to focus on the 1950s, right? Which is an exciting decade. It's the decade that made Hank Aaron, and he started out in high school and finished up as possibly the top superstar in all of baseball. So a good decade to focus on. I could come back in a month, no, in 6 months maybe, with research on the 60s and 70s, let's say. But at any rate, by the end of the 1959 season, he'd played 6 seasons, had 6 All-Star appearances. It's a little bit cheating because there were 2 games in 59. But at any rate, every year but his rookie year, he was an All-Star. 2 Gold Gloves, and I believe they were in 58 and 59, so he kind of had that momentum as a fielder now. He already had 179 home runs. So do the math, it's basically 30 home runs a year, just shy, a hair shy of 30 home runs a year. 2 batting titles. He was a World Series champion. He was an MVP. His slash line, as we say these days, was 323, 372, and 559. Not a lot to fault there, but if somebody were to try to fault it, I suppose they might today look and say, well, he didn't walk much. His on-base percentage is only 49 points above his batting average. That's disappointing, right? But he's only 25 years old. Could he still beat the Babe for career home runs? Well, not a question that a lot of people would have been asking at the end of the 1959 season. But had somebody asked, they might say to themselves, well, gosh, what would happen if he hit 35 home runs a year until he was 40? And what they would find is that would add 525 home runs to 179, and he would end up at 704. So good chance that they'd say, well, gosh, how the heck is a guy going to hit 35 home runs a year till he's 40 anyways, and even then be short? Nah. So at this time, not a lot of thought that Hank Aaron would ultimately hit home run 715. I want to focus on the batting average and the on-base percentage, because when we think about Hank Aaron, we think about consistency. And a lot of times that means home runs. We look at his home runs year to year. He never hit 50, but he sure hit 30 plus a lot, right? But I just want to focus. I broke down his statistics by decade. Interestingly enough, his batting average drops by decade from 323 to 308 all the way down to 278. But if we look at his on-base percentage, it stays nearly constant throughout his entire career. And so an interesting thing seemed to be happening, that where he was swinging at everything and getting hits, at some point, maybe that formula ran out, or maybe pitchers started pitching him differently. But at any rate, he was getting fewer hits, but he was also taking more walks. And so the on-base percentage pretty much stayed the same the whole time. So that's actually, I believe, the statistic where he was the most consistent throughout his career, even though we like to think home runs. Another thing that was just sort of an oddity to me was his stolen base numbers. In the 1950s, despite being described as a speedster, it just wasn't part of that Milwaukee offense, I suppose, well, with the exception of Sam Jethro, to steal bases maybe, because Hank Aaron's stolen base numbers tended to be, these are all per 162 games, 3, 5, 6, 2, right? 1960s, he stole 200 bases in that decade, including his 30-30 season. So that was one place where he was not consistent. And then in the 70s, you didn't expect him to steal a lot. And sure enough, he didn't. What I will do, I know I tend to go on and on. So I think what I will do, rather than play this video, even though I love it, is just let people know that SABR Day 2021, if you missed it, Bob Costas just did an excellent tribute to every one of the Hall of Famers that we lost. I think it was 10 Hall of Famers over a 12 or 13 month stretch, finished with Hank Aaron, and that's at the 128.36 mark. But wanting to be respectful of time, I think at the moment, let me just do this in case there are questions. I want to say thank you. I want to say, for people interested in baseball cards, at SABR BB Cards on Twitter is a good place to be. The SABR Baseball Cards blog, read that, it's good stuff, or write for us if you like. Collect Hank Aaron, but don't outbid me. And most importantly, I want to say with full sincerity, we can all honor the hammer in the way we live our lives. He is really somebody who dedicated himself to others, and as many honors as he earned during his career, he always seemed to be happier doing things for others than essentially taking praise for himself. So just a remarkable person. With that, let me stop sharing and see if, whoops, what did I do wrong? Sorry. There we go. Stop sharing. And then if anybody has any questions, I'll certainly do my best. Feel free to take yourself off mute. And if I'm qualified to do it, I will go to the chat and just see. Yes. Okay. Right. So Ryan notes 2 All-Star games from 59 to 62. So that explains how Hank Aaron, in his 23-year career, was a 25-time All-Star. despite not making the All-Star team every year. Oh, Mary says so excellent. Thank you. I appreciate that. And Jim says, fantastic. I appreciate that. Any questions at all? I might not know the answer, but I could try. Dave, I think you're on mute.
All right.
There you are.
I have a question on the coverage of the Negro Leagues by the Sporting News. Was that fairly common? It surprises me that they would give coverage to the Negro Leagues back in those days. But so how common was that?
You ask a great question. So I'm going to say for myself, I searched the Sporting News from about 1952 to 1953, essentially just the time period that felt relevant for Hank Aaron. Pardon me, 1951 to 1953. Now, by then, the Negro Leagues had lost a lot of talent. They were in a decline, right? What I found in the Sporting News was generally on around the same page that they might cover the American Association or one of the minor leagues. They would have a few little highlights from around the Negro Leagues. There wouldn't be a big feature story, but a lot of times you'd sort of get that, Negro American League roundup, and it would be, the Kansas City, or, maybe it would be the National League, but, the Kansas City Monarchs dropped 2 straight games, and the Clowns lost pitcher, whoever, So you wouldn't get a lot of detail in the Sporting News, but I was actually pleasantly surprised to see that anything at all was there. But it tended to be brief. It tended to be like one corner of one page that tried to cover everything together, right? Now, it's possible if you went further back into kind of more of the heyday of the league and Josh Gibson and Satchel Paige really burning things up, maybe there was more ink. I have not checked. But of course, the Sporting News is also famously known, at least through its publisher at the time, as roughly dismissive of African-American baseball talent. And so that's why I say I was pleasantly surprised to find any mentions of Hank Aaron with the Indianapolis Clowns.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, you got it. Anybody else?
Hey, Jason, awesome job, by the way. Any idea how much the Braves paid the Indianapolis Clowns for Aaron's services?
Okay. I believe that it was $10,000. I might have to look it up, because what I'm recalling was an article where it talked about something like, we're asking 10,000, but a lot of times the major league clubs would counter with something, and that's what I don't recall if there was any separate negotiation. But the number popping into my head is $10,000.
I've got a comment on that, Jason and Dirk. I just finished reading the Up North book that was in one of Jason's earlier slides, the photo of the cover. And that was 10,000 is the number mentioned in that book too.
Perfect. Okay. Yes.
Thanks.
Okay. Any other questions?
Oh, by the way, Aaron got a very small portion of the 10,000, but peanuts.
Yes. Yeah, that is exactly right. There is a funny story I'll share on the subject of salary, and folks know the way Major League Baseball was, prior to free agency and all these other things, is you kind of just had to negotiate your salary every single year and generally take what they wanted to give you. But there was, I think early in Hank Aaron's career, he had filled in maybe at second base or something like that for a not very good second baseman or something. And he ended up having a great year all around. But when he got his contract offer, he said to the owner, "Hey, I think you sent me this other guy's contract by mistake. Basically, you're trying to pay me like I'm a backup second baseman." So, and that was one thing that came through in a lot of the reading I did from these 1950s articles, was that Aaron had quite a sense of humor, and sometimes either played dumb or was maybe stereotyped as not very smart. But for the folks that got to know him, they realized that he was kind of wicked smart and had a great sense of humor and seemed to understand a lot more than he let on. Sometimes what would happen is, I think it might have been his first game where Robin Roberts faced him. Robin Roberts, by the way, famously talks about Hank Aaron as the only hitter who seemed to take naps between pitches. He was that relaxed at the plate. But Hank Aaron had a pretty good day off Robin Roberts, 2 for 4 or something like that. And teammates were like, "Hey, man, you did great off Robin Roberts," And Hank Aaron said, "Oh, what was the name of this guy pitching?" Right. And reality, right? In reality, I think it was in the, the interview that I read, it said the reality was Hank Aaron not only knew Robin Roberts' name, but most likely had studied him so much to know everything about the pitches he threw, where he had dinner the night before, and what color undershirt he wears. Like basically that here was Hank Aaron, who was this careful study of the game, but never let on and just sort of pretended, like he didn't really know even who the guy was. So yeah. I see from Gene. Jason, do you have any Hank Aaron cards behind you on the shelf? On this particular shelf, the answer ends up being no, because my whole kind of basement is segmented in different ways. So my Hank Aaron area is kind of across the room, but I brought one Hank Aaron Indianapolis Clowns bobblehead for good luck. And okay, any other questions?
Well, on behalf of the whole Halsey Trout chapter, Jason, I just think it was a wonderful time and presentation and well delivered, lots of fun, and thank you very much.
Hey, well, it was my pleasure. I sure appreciate it. I make no claim of being a true biographer / historian, so I tried to just mix a little bit of fun and collectibles and other things. Bob notes that Hank Aaron Stan Musial cover cost me 25 cents. The truth is, by the way, like if you're thinking about collecting, these magazines tend to be way cheaper than cards. So that Hank Aaron Stan Musial 1959 baseball preview, I think I paid $8. And sure, somebody with a marker wrote 25 cents, but to me, I just love it anyways. So no, thank you very much. And I'm not even kidding. If people wanted a 1960s version, it could be done. I would need some time, but I really appreciate the opportunity. And I think, with all sincerity, Hank Aaron is such a hero of mine, and I think so beloved to all of us as baseball fans. I was joking with my wife a couple of weeks ago. I said, you know what? As long as I have lots of pictures of Hank Aaron, people are going to have a good time, right? Hopefully I'll teach them some things they don't know and find some funny stories. But it is a pleasure to present on Hank Aaron and an honor.
Thank you very much.
Okay, take care, everybody. Take care, and hopefully we can do some in-person stuff soon with SABR. But in the meantime, these have been really fun ways to get to know other chapters. So my pleasure, and thank you, Jim, and thank you, everybody else.
Thank you. You're
Thanks
welcome.
again.
Take care.
All righty.